July 2021. While Beijing's strike against the private tutoring and edtech industry rattled the Chinese market, an Indian edtech unicorn became the world's largest company in the sector during the COVID-19 pandemic, adopting an aggressive acquisition strategy. Sweeping policy guidelines issued by the Central Committee of the Chinese Communist Party and the State Council now mandate that all existing private tutoring companies register as non-profit organizations. EdTech companies will be banned from going public and will be subject to regulatory approval. In sharp contrast, with a vibrant democracy, business-friendly climate, and a big market, India's predictable and stable environment has slowly but steadily transformed India into the new growth engine of the world. I am Laksh. Welcome to The Broken Concept, your daily dose of global geopolitics. Mao Zedong, in his great leap forward in the 1950s, announced major sweeping campaigns with an aim to modernize China and improve Chinese life. It was viewed that sparrows were an obstacle to development as they ate food grains. The CCP mobilized the great Chinese army with one objective: kill sparrows. They destroyed sparrow nests, shot the birds down from the sky, set up traps, even beat drums to stop sparrows from landing so that they'd die from exhaustion. The scale of this operation was so immense, it is probably the best experience the PLA has of actual warfare in its 94-year history. Such hasty and unscientific decisions are commonplace when it comes to the Chinese Communist Party. By next year, the results were apparent. The sparrows did not just eat food grains, they also ate the insects that destroyed the crops. With its natural predator gone, the insects were free to destroy crops at will. What happened next was a massive famine which led to over 50 million deaths in China. In 1943, India witnessed a famine of similar intensity in Bengal as well. However, there's one key difference between the gruesome tragedies in India and China. While the Bengal famine happened because the British Raj diverted food supplies from Bengal to their troops fighting World War II, the Chinese government, which claimed to represent its people, was directly responsible for killing millions of its own citizens. After Mao came Deng Xiaoping, a proponent of socialism with Chinese characteristics, and who led the Great Reform. The Communist Party authorities carried out the market reforms in two stages. The first stage, in the late 1970s and the early 1980s, involved the decollectivization of agriculture, the opening up of the country to foreign investment, and permission for entrepreneurs to start businesses. However, a large percentage of industries still remain state-owned. The second stage of reform, in the late 1980s and 1990s, involved the privatization and contracting out of much of the state-owned industry. While this looked great on paper, the Great Reform actually did nothing to stop the state ownership of private companies. At 50%, China has the highest level of state ownership of private companies in the world. The CCP has a stake in every company in China, big or small. What did I tell you about hasty and unscientific decisions? While subsidizing private companies in return for a stake so they compete better in the global market may have shown results in the short term, the CCP's desire to play the leading role in guiding China's economy was more of a self-goal. With the stock market at the whims of a communist government, the only sensible investment the people of China were left with was real estate. Not just the people, even local governments in China are also highly dependent on the sale of land to finance their budgets. Not surprisingly, 30% of the Chinese GDP comes from real estate alone. By international standards, the breathtaking scale of China's real estate price boom is unprecedented for a major economy. While many would like to focus on the similarities between India and China, what's more important are the differences. Most central to this video is that the two nations rely on entirely different systems of political economy. India is the world's largest parliamentary democracy, while China is a one-party dictatorship. India's reforms have scaled back state-run industries, while China's reforms have created a pseudo-free market command economy. India has courted capitalism and private enterprise, while China has tried to counter it. China and India have been simultaneously successful, yet have maintained their differences, and it is these differences which will decide which country will prevail in the long run. While the Chinese people are afraid of investing in their own stock market, the Indian stock market is currently experiencing record low interest rates and a retail investing boom. The country's market capitalization has surged 37% this year. The Indian economy is poised for 9.5% growth in 2021, while China, with an economy that runs on debt, is predicted to grow at just 4.5%. Indian technology startups, which are mopping up record inflows of venture capital this year, will gain further as global capital moves away from Chinese tech companies that are weathering a regulatory onslaught, according to multiple founders and investors. You know, people used to say the Chinese bubble will burst eventually. well, the Chinese bubble has now popped for sure. So far this year, India has already seen 25 new unicorns, startups valued at over $1 billion, and they've raised nearly $23 billion this year. In comparison, Indian startups received $11.1 billion in 2020 with 12 new unicorns created. That is a growth of 109% in 1 year. On the other hand, the ongoing China tech crackdown has resulted in over $500 billion being wiped out from Chinese tech stocks in a week, including from Alibaba Group, Kuaishou Technology and Tencent Holdings. The world's youngest and fastest urbanizing continent, Africa, will have 24 million more people on average living in its cities each year between 2015 and 2045, more than India and China combined, according to a 2016 McKinsey & Company estimate. And here, a pitched battle is being waged between two Indian companies and their Chinese rivals. India's Bajaj Auto and TVS are quickly capturing the two-wheeler market share in the African continent. Such has been the rise of the Indian brands that the number of Chinese companies present in the African market has come down from more than 200 a decade back to less than 40 now. The Chinese held over 90% of the automobile market in Africa a decade ago. Today, it has come down to just 40%. Bajaj Auto alone holds a 40% stake in the two- and three-wheeler market in Africa. India's exports of two-wheelers grew at 13.8% annually between 2008 and 2021, compared with 6.4% for Chinese companies. For African customers, Indian products are aspirational in terms of positioning, pricing, and quality, while Chinese firms outright copy all the brands and mush them into one, which can sometimes look decent, but most of the time, their products just look like blatant rip-offs. Indian companies have been able to compete and win in Africa based on their product strengths, local assembly operations, quality assurance, network of distribution partners, dealers, and service centers. Another interesting way Indian companies are making the most of Africa's boom is telecom. Airtel, which offers an unbeatable combination of value and growth to the African market, is the third largest mobile operator in the continent. While China Mobile, the country's state-owned mobile operator, dominates over the local Chinese market, no Chinese operator puts up a fight in international markets. Huawei, along with multiple Chinese operators, has been assisting the CCP with spying and stealing other companies' intellectual property for years. No wonder then, most countries are apprehensive when it comes to Chinese companies setting up their telecom infrastructure. A recent report by EIU, the Economist Intelligence Unit, explored the digital payments revolution around the world and found that India is the leading real-time payments market in the world, followed by China and South Korea. In 2016, India announced an interesting digital payment system called the e-rupee. It's neither a cryptocurrency nor a central bank digital currency. It is also not a digital or an e-wallet either. The digital payment actually comes in the form of a prepaid e-voucher from the UPI, or the United Payments Interface. The UPI is a cost-effective, secure, reliable, mobile-first, interoperable, open source, and instantaneous settlement platform, and it has opened up a bunch of opportunities for startups to come up with innovative solutions that elevate the customer experience. In comparison, innovation in Chinese digital payments is extremely limited. The digital payment system that exists in China today is a glorified digital wallet. The market is dominated by Alipay with very little scope for competition and does not have much for new fintech companies to build on. India's UPI illustrates how an enabling policy framework and supportive regulation can create the infrastructure needed for swift adoption. Government institutions and banks in India have encouraged the use of tools such as QR codes for merchants and radio frequency identification tags for toll gates. This has paved the way for India's drive towards real-time payments. The cheapest internet rates in the world, coupled with the UPI, has led to an 83% banking penetration in India, which stood at just 53% in 2014. Such an increase is unprecedented, and in terms of financial inclusion, India has taken the lead over China, where 80% of the population has a bank account. The Indian government has announced the National Infrastructure Pipeline, launched with 8,200 projects and entailing a cost of $1.5 trillion. It meets the Indian industry's request for a shelf of ready projects for investment. Another landmark initiative, the National Monetization Pipeline, brings the private sector into India's infrastructure mission by leasing out assets for operations and maintenance as well as for new investments. The Indian Railways' ambitious dedicated freight corridor project is all set to become a game changer in economic development of the country. The DFC project involves two freight corridors, a 1,506 km route along the western dedicated freight corridor and a 1,875 km route along the eastern dedicated freight corridor. By linking the major ports in the east and west with a dedicated electrified rail corridor, India is set to record the highest average speeds for freight trains in the world. The corridor will be inaugurated in 2022. Semi-high-speed trains built in India and capable of running at 200 km an hour are already in service. And by August 2023, another 75 of these will connect every nook and corner of the country. With 37 kilometers of highway being constructed every day, India is leading the world in the pace of road construction as well. The Ministry of Road Transport and Highways has constructed 13,394 kilometers of highway this year alone. While China's infrastructure boom slows down as it crumbles under high levels of debt, India is building the most urban transit systems anywhere in the world as well, with 19 of them operational and 8 more under construction. Back in 1798, English economist Thomas Malthus argued that human population had a tendency to outstrip all possible means of subsistence, which keeps the world eternally trapped in poverty. This observation was true in his time, as it was constrained by the fixed resources for growing food and slow technological progress. But recent history has proven Malthus wrong. Since the end of the Second World War, global population has more than doubled, and the per capita GDP of the world has risen by over 5 times. The rapid technological progress in the post-Malthusian world has made population an asset rather than a burden. China's one-child policy, lasting from 1980 to 2015, was part of a broad program of birth quotas, regulations, and enforcements designed to control the size of its rapidly growing population. The policy had serious implications for China's demographic and economic future. In 2017, China's fertility rate was 1.6, among the lowest in the world. China now has a considerable gender skew. There are roughly 4% more males than females in the country. There are 33 million more men, with 115 boys for every 100 girls as compared to women in China. In recent months, China's state media has been increasingly bleak on the outlook, saying the population may start to shrink in the next few years. The United Nations predicts the number of people living in mainland China will peak in 2030 before declining. As well as adding pressure on China's working age population and weighing down on productivity, a diminishing pool of working adults will also test China's ability to pay and care for an aging nation. India's demographic window of opportunity began in 2018, when the working age population began to grow larger than its dependent population, that is, children aged 14 years or below and people above 65 years of age. It is expected to last for 37 years until 2055. India has the potential to achieve a much faster pace of economic growth than both China and the US. Its demographic profile should increase growth through 5 distinct forces. The first is the swelling of India's labour force as its baby boomers reach working age. The second is the potential to divert resources from spending on children to investing in physical and human infrastructure. The third is a rise in women's workforce activity that naturally accompanies a decline in fertility. The fourth is that working ages also happen to be the prime years for savings, which is key to the accumulation of capital and technological innovation. And the fifth is the further boost to savings that occurs as the incentive to save for longer periods of retirement increases with greater longevity. China remains an oppressive one-party dictatorship. Just look at all the state censorship of memes relating Xi Jinping to Winnie the Pooh. China's state-run businesses remain a massive portion of the economy and wield huge power. While there is much concern over China's corporate debt, clocking in at 165% of GDP, to call China's development trajectory purely communist or capitalist would indeed make both Karl Marx and Adam Smith roll over in their graves. Deng Xiaoping and Xi Jinping have ambitiously used market forces when convenient and cast them aside when not. This mixed system has generated impressive economic successes but at a high political cost. India's ascent, on the other hand, has been far more modest, but still significant. Unlike China, India, since independence, has remained a functional parliamentary democracy. Although the two nations initially embraced socialist economics in the middle of the 20th century, India and China have very much gone their separate ways. As India moves towards a more traditional free market system, China embraces a command economy while employing capitalism when convenient. India has conquered China in the past when a Buddhist monk from India traveled to China in the 4th century AD and spread the teachings of the Buddha. As they say, the dragon is imaginary. The tiger, however, is real, and now it has started to roar.